This envelope could destroy our marriage. Midnight. The hospital. Cold white lights cut through the silence like blades. Victoria Hayes stood frozen, her hand gripping an unopened biopsy report. A secret was waiting inside. Dangerous. And not just for her. The question was, who would fall apart first when the truth finally came out? Click. The door swung open. Andrew Cole walked in. No rush, no concern, not even a glance at the wife who had been waiting for him. Victoria swallowed hard. Andrew, I think this is serious. He didn't step closer. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" Instead, he said, "We need to talk." Silence filled the room. Then he looked her straight in the eye. "I've already filed for divorce." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Victoria blinked. Once. "You already filed?" "I can't live like this," Andrew said, his voice calm and unwavering. "I don't want the burden of taking care of someone who's sick. That's not the life I chose." Every word, cold, deliberate, precise, as if he had rehearsed this moment for a long time. Outside, the wheels of a hospital cart rattled down the hallway. Life went on. Inside, everything shattered. Victoria looked at him. She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she didn't even react. She was simply too calm. "Okay," she said softly. Andrew hesitated. "That's it?" Victoria lowered her eyes, picked up a pen, and signed, without a second of hesitation. Click. She capped the pen. It was over. But not in the way he expected. Andrew frowned. A strange feeling crept over him. It was too easy, too fast, too wrong. Victoria slowly looked up. The weakness had disappeared from her eyes. She met his gaze and smiled. Why would a woman who had just received life-changing test results sign divorce papers without hesitation? As if she had been waiting for this exact moment all along. Andrew Cole wasn't the kind of man anyone would call a failure. Quite the opposite. In Chicago, he was the senior operations manager at a major logistics company. Tailored suits, a calendar packed with meetings, an inbox where every email was marked urgent. From the outside, he looked stable, successful, dependable. And Andrew believed one thing almost without question. Everything I have, I built with my own two hands. 2 days before he filed for divorce. Andrew stood inside a glass-walled conference room. "We need to accelerate the medical supply chain this quarter," he said, pointing at the slide on the screen. "This is the biggest contract of the year." His boss nodded. "This client is absolutely critical. If we lose them, we lose 40% of our revenue." Andrew gave a confident smile. "We're not going to lose them." What he didn't know was that those contracts had never really been his to control. Victoria, the wife he was about to leave, was a silent partner. She stayed behind the scenes. Her name never appeared in public, yet she was one of the largest shareholders in the supply group that quietly supported the entire operation. That evening, Andrew came home to find Victoria reading through a stack of documents. He glanced at her with a half-teasing smile. "Reading more of that random stuff again?" Victoria didn't look up. "Just work," Andrew laughed. "Work? You don't even know how a supply chain works." A brief silence followed. Victoria calmly turned the page. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. The truth was simple. The company Andrew helped run depended on contracts that Victoria controlled behind the scenes. But in his eyes, she was nothing more than someone who didn't understand the real world. Andrew poured himself a glass of wine and looked out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Everything you see here," he said, "I built it." Victoria slowly looked up. Her eyes lingered on him, as if she were quietly weighing something. Then she simply replied, "Okay." Andrew had no idea. He was standing on a foundation his own wife had built, one layer at a time, one contract at a time, one relationship at a time. Time passed, and Andrew began to change, not because he needed more money, but because he wanted more. "At work, that was my idea," Andrew said during a meeting. A colleague at the far end of the table froze. "But that's the proposal I sent you last week." Andrew cut him off. "We're a team. Don't get caught up in the details." Their manager nodded. Andrew received all the credit. He had started taking credit for other people's work, smoothly, effortlessly, without leaving a trace. At home, Victoria set dinner on the table. Andrew didn't even look up. "I'm busy," he said, his eyes still glued to his laptop. "I just wanted to." "Victoria," he interrupted with a sigh, "you don't understand the kind of pressure I deal with out there." Silence. Then he added, even colder, "You don't even understand how the real world works." The words hung in the air. Victoria stood perfectly still. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she quietly asked, "So, what exactly is your real world?" Andrew let out a dismissive laugh. "It's where people fight to get ahead, where they create value, not where they sit around reading meaningless papers all day." In Andrew's eyes, Victoria no longer had any value. She didn't contribute. She didn't understand anything. She wasn't worthy of standing beside him anymore. But what he failed to see was that the woman standing in front of him was the very person who had built the real world he was so proud of. Victoria turned away. Something in her eyes had changed. The sadness was gone. The hurt had disappeared. What remained was calculation. Andrew had no idea. The person who understood how the real game was played wasn't him. It was the woman he had just pushed out of his own life. The sharp smell of antiseptic, harsh white lights, time itself seemed to slow. Victoria lay in her hospital bed, her eyes open, but empty. "We found a tumor," the doctor said carefully. "It needs to be treated immediately. The sooner the better." Silence. Victoria nodded. She didn't ask a single question. That night, she picked up her phone and called Andrew. Ring, ring. No answer. She sent him a text. "I'm in the hospital. I may need surgery. Seen." No reply. The second day, she called again. No answer. The third day, the message still showed only one word: seen. 10 days of treatment passed. Not one phone call. Not one visit. A nurse walked into the room and placed her medication on the bedside table. "Hasn't anyone from your family come to see you?" Victoria gently shook her head. No. Her voice was so calm, it was unsettling. Day 11. The door opened. Andrew walked in. The same tailored suit, the same composed expression, but he wasn't there to check on her. "We need to finish the paperwork," he said. He placed a stack of documents on the table. Divorce papers. And then, "I'm keeping the house," he said bluntly. "You don't need a place that big, not in your condition." The words cut like a knife. Victoria looked at the papers. Then she looked at him. She wasn't angry. She wasn't hurt. She simply looked at him. After disappearing for 10 days, he came back only to take the last thing she had left. Victoria picked up the pen and signed. Again, Andrew frowned. "You're not even going to fight for anything?" Victoria set the pen down. "I don't need to." An uneasy silence settled over the room. Andrew felt relieved. Everything had been far too easy. What he didn't realize was that this easy was the most dangerous thing of all. Victoria leaned back against her pillow. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling. Did she have nothing left to lose? Or was she finally ready to take everything back? Andrew believed she was losing everything: her health, her marriage, her home. What he didn't know was that the person about to lose everything was him. Night fell. The hospital room grew dark. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor broke the silence. Victoria lay there alone, no one beside her, no tears, no complaints, only a silence, heavy enough to suffocate. She opened her eyes, picked up her phone, and dialed a number. "Marcus." The voice on the other end paused for a moment. "Victoria?" "I need you to review the entire investment portfolio," she said, "especially everything tied to the medical supply chain." Silence. Marcus understood immediately. "Are you really going through with this?" Marcus lowered his voice. "If you make your move now, it'll hit him where it hurts the most." Victoria stared at the ceiling. There was no weakness left in her eyes. "I know." Marcus let out a slow breath. "Then we do this clean. No emotion. No mistakes." Victoria gently closed her eyes. "I'm not doing this because of emotion." A beat passed. "I'm doing it because of the system." She wasn't choosing revenge through tears. She was choosing to strike the one thing Andrew depended on most. Without him ever realizing it, Marcus continued, "One precise move, and the entire chain will trigger a domino effect." Victoria opened her eyes, cold, focused. "Precise. Then let's begin." She ended the call. The room fell silent once again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence, right before the storm. A decision had just been made. One move, powerful enough to destroy Andrew's entire career, while he still believed he was the one in control. Monday. 8 a.m., ping. One email, then another, then 10 more. Within minutes, the entire company's inbox lit up. Internal audit, effective immediately. Contract review notice, temporary suspension of key vendors. Andrew frowned as he scrolled through the flood of messages. What the hell is this? His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Andrew, our vendors are being put on hold. The supply chain is shutting down. We've apparently violated a contract provision. That's impossible, Andrew cut in. I approved every one of those contracts. A single sentence, one that unintentionally confirmed the worst possible scenario. Emergency meeting. His boss slammed a contract onto the conference table. That's your signature. Andrew looked down. It was. His signature is a small operational clause, one he had overlooked. But now, the company had been found in serious breach because of the agreement Andrew had signed. Our partner has exercised its oversight rights, his boss said, his voice tight with frustration. They're demanding a full audit of the entire operation. Andrew clenched his fists. Which partner? Silence. No one answered. This audit wasn't random. It had been triggered, deliberately, by a shareholder with enough authority to pull the lever. That afternoon, Andrew was summoned into an executive meeting. The room felt heavy enough to suffocate. Until the investigation is complete, his boss said, you're relieved of all operational decision-making authority. Relieved. To Andrew, that meant losing control. He walked out of the room. His phone kept vibrating. More contracts were being frozen. Everything he thought he controlled was slipping through his fingers. But the most terrifying part, he had no idea who was behind it. Someone had pressed the button. The system had begun to collapse, and Andrew was still searching for the culprit in the dark. The front door swung open. Andrew walked in and tossed his keys onto the table. His tie was loosened. His breathing was uneven. Something's wrong. The contracts are freezing. Victoria was already sitting there. A folder rested on the table in front of her. She slid it toward him, calmly, deliberately. It's not something, she said. She looked up. Her eyes were steady, cold. It's someone. Andrew froze. What are you talking about? Victoria nudged the folder closer. You should read it. Andrew flipped through the pages. Vendor names, supply chain records, the company's most critical contracts. Every one of them looked familiar. Then he saw it, the approving signature. It wasn't his. It was Victoria Hayes. I approved every major vendor your company depends on. The words landed like the final cut of a knife. In that instant, Andrew realized the truth. Everything he had been so proud of had never really belonged to him. His career had always been resting in her hands. That's impossible, he whispered, taking a step back. You're just the woman who doesn't understand the real world? Victoria finished the sentence for him. A faint smile touched her lips. Are you sure about that? Andrew said nothing. For the first time, he had no answer. Victoria picked up another stack of papers and placed them on the table. Divorce papers, but not the ones he had given her. I filed my own, she said. Andrew flipped to the final page. The terms were clear. He had to move out of the house, and he alone would assume full legal responsibility for every operational violation tied to the contracts he had signed. Andrew wasn't just losing control. He was about to pay the price for every decision he'd ever put his name on. You're destroying me, he whispered. Victoria slowly shook her head. No. A brief pause. I'm simply no longer protecting you. The room fell into absolute silence. Andrew stood there, empty, speechless. But Victoria kept looking at him, calm, composed, as if she still had one final move left to make. And the last strike hadn't come yet. But when it did, Andrew would have nothing left to lose. Late afternoon. The room was darker than usual. Victoria's phone vibrated. Marcus, I've sent you the entire file, he said, his voice low. But you need to look through it carefully. Victoria opened the email. One file after another appeared. They weren't reports. They were internal emails from Andrew's company, private messages between employees, confidential meeting schedules between Andrew and a vendor. She read them slowly, without expression, only her eyes, growing colder with every page. Marcus sent another message. You understand what all this means, don't you? Victoria replied. I do. Andrew hadn't simply made a mistake. He had knowingly built an inappropriate relationship with a vendor for his own personal gain. Victoria opened the second file. Audio recordings, confirmation emails, a trail of financial transactions, everything. Too clear to deny. The evidence had been collected long before. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a complete legal case. Marcus spoke quietly over the phone. If this comes out, he won't just lose his job. A brief pause. He'll lose everything. Victoria looked out the window. The Chicago skyline stretched into the distance. The city lights were beginning to come alive. She wasn't angry. She wasn't satisfied. She simply felt empty. Are you sure? Marcus asked. Victoria was silent for a few seconds. He already made his choice. The next day, Andrew's company, chaos filled the building. 2 security officers stood outside the conference room. Andrew Cole, you're being placed on administrative leave. What? Andrew shot to his feet. You can't? There's an internal investigation underway. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Texts, emails, phone calls. No one answered. His name began appearing throughout the company's internal reports, no longer listed as manager, now labeled subject of investigation. That evening, Andrew called. Once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Victoria answered. Victoria, please. His voice was gone, the confidence, the control. All that remained was panic, silence. Then Victoria spoke. You didn't lose me. A pause. You exposed yourself. The line went dead. Andrew stood there, frozen. The final truth. No one destroyed him. He did it to himself. But what about Victoria? Had she really won, or was this only the beginning of something entirely new? Time passed. The hospital, bright white lights, the steady rhythm of medical equipment. Your scans are clear. The doctor spoke gently. There's no sign of the tumor anymore. Victoria didn't react right away. She simply closed her eyes and let out a long, deep breath. She didn't celebrate. She didn't break down in tears. She simply felt relieved. The woman everyone believed was the weakest had never truly been powerless. She hadn't just survived. She had been controlling the entire game for a very long time. 3 months later, the airport. Victoria rolled her suitcase behind her. She never looked back. No one came to see her off. No explanations. No goodbyes. A new life. No identity tied to the old system. No obligations. No need to prove herself to anyone ever again. The final message. Real strength doesn't belong to the person with the loudest voice. It belongs to the person who knows their own worth and knows exactly when to make their move. Because sometimes the person everyone believes is the weakest is the one who rewrites the entire game.